If you made it more than 3 days consecutively saying it's a good idea, it's a good idea. It's always the ones that you think of late at night, and the next day you're like, "Oh God, that sucked."
That
Those.
was a terrible one. Yeah.
And welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Yeti, and this is Yeti Talks, where we get down in the business talking with game developers and their projects. Today, I have Dave Mills with me. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, so Dave, I heard about you and I heard about this project you're putting together, an educational simulator, and I'm excited to learn about it. Can you tell me a little bit about the background? How did you come up with the idea to put this together, or the team? I presume you're on a team, or are you working by
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, no, working with a team, and it all came about. The concept, or at least the frustration that I had, came from a while back. I had gone to school for studio art, and I had worked a lot with Maya. And then when school stopped and I couldn't afford Maya anymore, then I needed a free software, and Blender was the solution. But transitioning over from Maya into Blender was such a frustration because I already knew how to do a lot of things, but I didn't know how to do them in Blender. And then the navigation that I was familiar with in Maya is different in Blender, and so just getting used to that and sort of getting the muscle memory of that became like a very frustrating process. And as I continue on through the industry, I just ran into a lot of people who had like similar situations, or they were starting to learn Blender, and they would start, but it would just become really frustrating. And then I started to do a little bit more research and looked at the numbers, and the numbers are actually like pretty significant of the people who want to start Blender, people who download it,
Huh.
and then the drop off from that. And so that was the sort of big inspiration. I thought, wow, how could I make it so that it was less frustrating to learn Blender?
That sounds great. I love the insight to try to see past your own situation and figure out how can I bring other people that may have a similar experience and help them along with their journey.
Hmm.
Did
Yeah.
Where did you go to school? You said you went to for art design.
So I went for studio art and then creative technology at Virginia Tech.
How long did you go there for?
Oh, for quite a while. So I had started off in mechanical engineering.
Oh, okay.
Eventually, I have like a bit of an engineering mind, but when I couldn't work as much with my hands or be nearly as creative as I wanted to within engineering, I broke out and then explored a number of things. Eventually, found myself in studio art, and then quickly became ingratiated with like 3D animation, 3D character modeling, environment design, and then trying to make things like work with Arduino's microcontrollers, and then that all kind of led into creative technology, and then eventually to where I am now, where I'm in the XR realm.
I think that's a great start going into engineering at the beginning because it gives you a certain mindset when putting things together and a planning stages that you don't
Mm,
necessarily have if you go straight into the art world. You may learn about storyboarding kind of at the extent, but on the technical side of things, engineering and beyond, project management, things like that, you have to learn how to do like con boards and scrum meetings, and the details are much more intense. And so I think that carries a long way in a situation like yourself.
yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I have some similar experience. I went started out school computer science and then went into mechanical engineering, and then just fell into IT because who knows what life's all about, and I
Hmm.
just take it one day at a time.
And now
uh,
you're doing sort of the
oh
creative
yeah.
side of it, where
Well,
you're interviewing and getting into game dev, and it's
yeah. I mean,
I'm
IT
glad to hear it.
will suck the soul out of you really quick, and so it any kind of creative passion you have will regularly come to the surface, and you have to find a way to tap into that. Video game development for me is actually it's what I wanted to get into. Unfortunately, I sit down for something for 20 minutes and I hear a bell and I'm off somewhere else.
Mm.
I get really distracted, and I'm always trying to do some kind of Unreal Engine tutorial or something like that. But I'll get about a third into it before I have completely lost sight of it. So I'll kind of nibble at the details and learn a little bit, but then it'll be just long enough before I revisit it, and I've mostly forgotten what I did before. So I'm more of a natural talker, and I was like, you know what, I still want to get involved with video games and people who are making them, but this may be a different approach to that same passion, kind of a different angle, and
Hmm.
helping out in that sense.
Yeah, I
Uh,
love it.
and so speaking of Unreal Engine, how does that compare to something like Blender? Did you ever mess around with different engines?
Oh yeah. Well, so I'm actually building Blender Start here in Unity. Like when it comes to the comparison between Unity and Unreal, I've found that Unity is just a bit more compatible with things in general. I also kind of see like when someone asked me what the difference between Unreal and Unity was, and I kind of I almost associate Unreal with like innovators, like people who are really pushing the edge,
Huh.
but it means that it sort of comes at a price that like you really have to dig in, really have to be pushing, and you have to
Yeah.
do a lot of this stuff without a lot of like help. It's difficult to find help, and there's not like a ton of support. But if you are able to push through, then you can come up with some amazing looking things. And then when it comes to Unity, I sort of see Unity as like community. So Unity itself is just really compatible with like lots of different hardwares. So when you export it, you can export it to different game systems or to computers, to iPhones, and then to new headsets. And then I've just found that like there's a lot of community around Unity. You have a lot of people who are starting it, and a lot of people who are willing to help, and a lot of questions that have already been asked that have the answers out there. So that's why I ended up sort of going more towards Unity, and and then when it comes to like other softwares, and like one of the other reasons why I don't actually build the thing in Blender is I just don't have a familiarity with it. I'm kind of just working with what I know,
Yeah.
and so ideally I would have been able to make it as a plugin for Blender, but
Hmm.
in this case, I am, yeah, again, working with what I know. I think I think it will work pretty well as a game outside of Blender, and then when people get used to it, then they hop into Blender and everything looks familiar. Um, and then when it comes to like 3ds Max, which is a sort of competitor to Maya,
Yeah, that's another
or
throwback.
uh, yeah, a lot of these things they're kind of getting deprecated now. But yeah, they just like, it seemed as though Blender was kind of the way to go because it was free, and so
Hmm.
many people, everyone I run into, you'll either like you'll run into a few legacy people who like have worked in the industry and they work with like something that you got to pay for, but like a lot of these other people, they're using Blender, and Blender just seems to be this thing that continuously improves, and it's just got a really good foundation around it, and so that's why we chose to continue on with helping spread the word of Blender.
Yeah, that's great. I think years ago I had some shallow experience with Blender, and it may have involved trying to learn how to rig models
Mm.
to get them set up for animation. And so I had some crazy ideas with turning 3D models into some kind of animated situation. But I just one of hundreds of other examples where I got into it and then and then got distracted.
Mhm.
So I when you're talking about Maya and 3D Max, I'm thinking of also another old one, or Z Sculptor, where
Oh
you
yeah.
can make a model. I think that ties hand in hand with something like Blender, right? It's not necessarily a competitor.
So I don't know how compatible they are, but I do believe you can do some sculpting within Blender, but not quite as detailed or extensive as ZBrush. Like if you get in the industry, then you're probably going to be using ZBrush for some finalized character design, and then they'll like take those things and simplify them and
Mhm.
make them more game ready. But ZBrush is like really where you're sort of doing that fine stuff. Which what have I run into recently? Yeah, it was called, I think it's called Nomad, and that's on the iPad. And I feel like I'm like really impressed with these iPad apps that are capable of doing 3D work, and pretty much like 3D work on the go.
Okay.
Um, so I'd say if you're like interested in the sculpting and like more detailed aspect of 3D design, then it might be worth looking into Nomad. And it would be really fun to make a game sort of helping people to get with those. But yeah, unfortunately, Blender Start here is like very basic. It's for people who are just getting started,
Mm.
and then we leave it to more professionals, people who actually know more about the that specific niche to host their tutorials, whether that be on YouTube or whatever.
Okay. And when I hear the word simulator, my brain kind of goes across a spectrum. And I personally love strategy games. I like flight simulators, like Microsoft Flight Simulator. There's one called DCS World, where it's actually a little bit more intense than Flight Simulator. And then there's other simulation, or they kind of use it a bit of a hyperbole with the word. So like Goat Simulator, and then you have Car Mechanic Simulator. That one's been around for like 20 years, and they release a new version every once in a while. But if you play it and you're a car mechanic, it's very there's an arcade sensation to it, right? Like, yeah, it's a simulation. Like, you go to do an oil change, you're gonna take off the bolts, you're gonna have to take off the oil pan and all this. But it's very the way that you interact with it visually is almost nothing to like that what you would do in real life. So when you're looking at your concept, is there any kind of, is it meant to be more of a this is, you're going to learn how to do it so you can do it in real life, or is it kind of uh, a encapsulation of an arcade experience, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I would say it is to actually learn how to do the basics of Blender. And when I say the basics, like if you open up Blender for the first time and you try rotating around the cube that is there, you can't do it. Like the intuitive thing is to like do a left click on the mouse and move the mouse and
Huh.
have that
Okay.
rotate. And that's not what actually happens. You have to press the middle mouse button in and then move it and move your mouse. And so they're like unintuitive things that are associated with just simple navigation within Blender that are difficult to wrap your brain around, especially if you've already trained your brain like I did in Maya, where it's like a whole different schema. And so like just recalibrating your brain to think in that really comes just down to like muscle memory. You have to like practice and practice. And the unfortunate thing about practicing is that it's just boring. It's just like not very fun at all. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make up for that boring aspect by gamifying the tasks that like build up the muscle memory. And so within Blender Start here, you're using the same controls for these simple navigations to move objects, to rotate them, to view selected. Like some of the hotkeys in Blender that are not intuitive, like we'll be training you, and you'll be using those to actually defeat the sort of main antagonist of the game, but all by using reinforcement learning of those actual Blender navigation tools.
I was thinking, if you had like a James Bond villain as a nemesis, and he was going to delete your save file if you didn't finish it within a certain time frame, like, make that the
That's
legendary mode.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Well, I was going to say we have a pretty um, we're happy with the main enemy that you're fighting against in it.
oh, good.
Yeah.
And do you have to, if I'm coming and I'm picking this up, do I also have to run it on top of an actual version of Blender, or do you have that packaged all together?
No, so yeah, it is separate from Blender. It is like technically a Unity game. So you would, in the same way that you would download a Steam game that was made with Unity, that would be the same thing. And so you would launch it, and it would be completely separate from Blender. It would just run on your PC.
And did you recreate Blender kind of in your own way, or did you package it into the Unity engine that you have?
Yeah, so that it was actually a really fun uh, exercise, but was I just copied everything from Blender. So I would hop into Blender, I would just see what the navigation stuff was, and then I would have to recreate that in Unity, like at the game scene level.
Huh.
And so, another like kind of an annoying thing about Blender, I guess it's annoying if you're used to the axes being a different way, but they orient their XYZ axis differently than Unity does. So you have to do like a conversion every single time
Oh wow.
that it's supposed to be going in one axis direction, but Unity is handling it differently, which is just it adds another layer of like really fun complexity to it. But like been pretty much developing it hand in hand with ChatGPT. It's been like an excellent exercise to have a conversation with ChatGPT to help develop the tools or like the recreation of the navigation system.
Yeah, that's great to hear using some of the more modern tools that are available out there. And I think most people that are using ChatGPT are just like, how can I get rich today? And so to
Yeah.
to hear extended projects and really stretching the boundaries, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, it's an excellent tool.
What are you going to incorporate Steam achievements or other, depending on what platform you put it on? So if you accomplish, like, say, your first save file, are you going to give them an achievement that will pop up, or?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the Steve achievements and locking them in, but like, absolutely, I would totally love to have that. I want this to be kind of this like, you know, serotonin hitting machine because
Absolutely.
like so many of these tasks are just very boring otherwise. And so if you can make something boring into something exciting, then I would love to do it. So yeah, I'm totally going to do it. Uh, it depends on how much kind of funding we ultimately get when it comes to our Kickstarter, of like how far we can take these things.
Yeah.
But I would love to have that type of thing
Well,
integrated.
if you ever want to take it to the next level, years down the road, and you're looking for something to do take the same model, but for Forex. Are you familiar with
Mhm.
Forex?
No, no, what's Forex?
Forex stands for foreign exchange. It's a trading financial market where you go and you exchange financial currencies. So, say U.S. dollar to the yen, and you're
Hmm.
basically betting. It's not a bet, but you're trading the value of, say, one U.S. dollar for the yen, and then if because the values of currencies fluctuate like every second,
Hmm.
and if it gains more money, you can sell it and then make a kind of short change it there. So it's like you could take your examples and evolve it to other platforms, and get people to really learn and how to benefit in the greater beyond. But
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely on the roadmap is to we if Blender Start Here does well, then we plan to take Start Here and continue it on with a lot of other whether they be softwares or learning modules, but like the
yeah.
whole Start Here series, we would love to actually like expand this and make this a much bigger thing in the end.
And if you get all your licensing stuff ironed out, you may, if you run into funding issues, it may be something to apply for something like Shark Tank, because they love that kind
Yeah,
of
who
stuff.
knows? Yeah.
So let's talk about the team. It sounds like this was your brainchild when you were in college and trying to figure out how to learn it and how you can get other people to not go through the same long steps that it took you to go through.
Mhm.
How did you bring in other team members? Because I believe I was first talking to someone else before we introduced each other.
Yeah, yeah. So my co-founders, Nina and Yang, we all met during an a boot camp called XR Terra,
Hmm.
and so we were all like learning, interested in building in VR, in virtual reality, and mixed reality, and also augmented reality. And they were on the design side, and I was on the development side. And so we were kind of like independent of each other. And then for the final project, they combined the two cohorts, and we built a project that was a cross-platform escape room.
Huh.
So the person in VR was essentially in a room that they had to escape, and then a person in AR was able to get kind of like a a god view over it, and see the player inside, and then interact with them, which is, at the time it was like pretty innovative. I still have not really seen it implemented very often. One of the reasons is it's like ends up being almost too complex, where it's just such a headache to juggle everything. So it breaks really easily, and it's hard to maintain. Uh, but for a short final project, it worked out really well. And after that, we kind of like hit it off, and we, out of the whole cohort, we asked everyone if they wanted to kind of create a company that was interested in education, because all of us are really focused on accessible education, and actually, like, in the future, a lot of simulated education. And we three combined together. We had a few other people who, continued to help us build. We ended up building a project that was accepted into Oculus Launchpad, and so that project went on. But we ultimately decided to put a pause on that project because it was just biting off more than we can chew. And so for a while, we were kind of sitting, and then when I actually started building out Blender Start Here, then we all kind of kicked into gear. And so, Ying is really great at design, and has a good concept for marketing. And then Nina is really good at sort of handling the business side of things, and getting us partnerships, getting me on cool interviews, and then really building up those relationships.
Uh, So the boot camp, how long was that? Was it a weekend, or how long did they have that boot camp going for?
Oh no, it was for a while. It was, I think, for like a month, maybe 2 months. Um, I'll say a month, and maybe some change, but it
Was it
was like a
just
fairly significant amount of time.
was it segmented to like a class time almost, like from 6 p.m.
Yeah.
to 8 p.m. every day, or
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
And did you meet your partners on virtually, or do you ever get to meet? Are you guys nearby each other in person?
Yeah, that's the other cool thing is we were all virtual. So we started the company 2 years ago, and I only recently met Ying in person, face to
Huh.
face, this past month at Reality Hack, the MIT Boston Reality Hack.
Okay.
We all did a hack together, and then Nina I've seen like a couple various times, but I was living in Los Angeles. I was kind of hopping around. And then Ying, she's in San Jose, and then Nina is in Hawaii.
Oh
So
wow.
we've all been remote for the majority of our company's existence.
I still can't wrap my head around the time frame for Hawaii, or the time zone, because it's only like
It's
it's only
wild.
4 hours behind Mountain Time, and
Uh,
but I'm like, Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. How is it only 4 hours behind? It should
I
be
know.
8 hours behind.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Have you guys filed an LLC, or is that how your company's operating, or how much on the
Yep.
business side have you put things together?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, we have a proper LLC. We got a proper bank account. We're doing everything by the books,
Yeah,
as
get
much as
that
we can.
EIN number.
Yep. Got to do those taxes.
Yeah. And so it looks like you officially kicked this off towards the end of last year, and you've been working on it for almost 6 months now. How far
Yep.
along do you think you are? Your projected date looks like 2025. So do you
Mhm.
think you're on target with that pretty well, or tell me a little about that?
Yeah, yeah, I feel pretty confident about that date. Actually, like my original date, I pushed it back a little bit because I always kind of like to, um, you know, prepare more and then deliver early. Um, and a lot of the development of it has been kind of like creating a good foundation, good bones in the whole thing. So, my document, I am I have pretty extensive documentation. I'm trying to set it up so that people can like come in and work for a short amount of time, and if they need to leave, then it's we don't rely on them too heavily.
Yeah.
I'm trying to create like a very modular system. I'm building like I've built analytics into it so that we can see if people are getting stuck anywhere, and we can improve how we're building it out. So as we give out demos, then I can like be getting feedback on whether people are getting stuck at a certain state. We are what else? Remote configuration, so that builds on our concept of partnering with uh, people who are making Blender tutorials,
Yeah.
sort of influencers, and we're creating collector cards in throughout the game. And so as you find them, then you're introduced to different Blender influencers. And you can say like, oh, if I'm interested in say like character design or rigging or animation or environmental design, and so you can see all these people pop up, and it'll highlight whether they are like more for beginners or more advanced, if they are more for animation or whether they're more for scene design. And so you can already collect all these things, but we wanted to make it so that these influencers can edit their cards later on, which means we can, if we set it up so that they can do remote configuration, then all they need to do is update their information on like a website that we
Hmm.
host, and then the game will pull that into it. And so no one needs to update their entire game just to get the updated information of the influencers. We can just update it on the fly. So there are like lots of these considerations that are going in that are kind of creating very good bones for the entire thing. And at this point, we only have the one level. Well, we kind of have two levels. Like one's an introduction level, and then the next one is the actual like movement. Um, but when it comes down to what the demo is, it might seem like slightly underwhelming, like not as extensive. But that's because a lot of thought has gone into um, the structure of everything, so that it can really scale and then be built out to the full extent that it needs to be.
Now, I imagine at some point, Blender, the company, is going to hear about this, and the more successful you are, the more likely they're going to see it. What have you already reached out to try to talk to Blender? I can see a positive scenario where they like, hey, this is great. We want to partner with you guys. Do a licensing deal or something like that. Have you had that conversation yet?
Yeah. So actually, just recently, this past month, I reached out to Ton Rosendahl. He's the creator of Blender, and
Oh wow.
I said like, hey, like, you know, is there going to be an issue with having the title being like Blender Start Here? And sort of told him our situation. It's made it clear that we were going to have a disclaimer at the beginning of the demo saying that like we are not officially affiliated with Blender.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back and he said, yeah, like I don't see there being a problem. So there's still some tweaks we have to do on our logo, because I am suspicious that our logo might be a little too close. It might be problematic. So we're going through a redesign right now, but we're in the MVP stage, and so we nothing fully official has been actually made. But it seems like as long as we keep a conversation going, that we've already got a green light, and I think we're set up to have a good relationship with the Blender team.
And MVP meaning minimum viable product, right?
Yep, that's
Okay,
correct.
excellent.
Yeah, so we'll be splitting it up. So, you have the first part, which is like POC, which is proof of concept, where you kind of like really throw things together. And then you have MVP, where it's the minimal viable product. And so you polish it up a little bit, and ideally you would put analytics or things that are going to have responses back. So as people play it, they can give you feedback,
Hmm.
or you can already inherently get feedback. And then you go into alpha phase. And so there you're like polishing things up more. You're actually creating the entire project. And then you go into beta, where you start doing more like quality assurance and bug testing. And then you can, then beyond that, you kind of do a cross between like release channel and production. And so production is when you are like, actually pushing it out into the world, and then you like do the final cleanup and updates of, edge cases that you didn't even expect. And so you just need to push an update, or like security concerns or something like that.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's definitely well thought out. Now this.
Yeah, we're working with such a small budget that everything really does have to be thought out like pretty meticulously. And so if the better you can estimate where time is going,
Mhm.
then the more likely you are to not waste money, not waste people's time, and actually get a product out there.
This I can't help but to think, did you ever start out trying to make a tutorial YouTube channel of any kind for Blender? Have you tried that avenue to either what led you to this, or perhaps a thought to supplement it?
Blender, actually, a couple. There should be like a couple of tutorials floating around on YouTube. I mostly have done Unity tutorials,
Okay.
because again, when it comes to like my specialty, it's like in Unity and not in Blender. Like I know how to use Blender to a fair and competent extent, but I am by no means like an expert. But I would consider myself much more advanced within Unity. So I've definitely been making tutorials, even just for myself,
Hmm.
uh, for close over 10 years now, where I can kind of quickly hop onto OBS, and I'll record myself going through the entire steps, trying to get through it as quickly as possible. And then later on, when I'm like, oh wait, how did I do that? Because I have a terrible memory.
Yeah.
But I do remember where I saved the video, and so I'll look at the video and I'll be like, okay, yeah.
OBS is amazing, and I remember back when I first came across OBS. I think it was about 2015. There were so many other. There was three or four different paid products, and this had come from learning about Twitch streaming at the time.
Hmm.
And I don't remember their names, but it was, hey, you want to record, pay, you got to pay $50, or you got to pay a subscription or something like that. And then I come
Hmm.
across OBS, and it has everything all these people have and
Right.
more. And I'm like, it's free.
And
Like,
it's free. It's like Blender.
what?
It's like if they're doing it for free, and you're able to like accomplish professional
Yeah.
quality tasks. It's amazing. I
I
love it.
suppose there's a little bit of a learning curve. It's not just click, record, and go, but if you're on a computer, there is some setup you're going to have to do, or you're going to have a bad time.
Hmm.
And so, but
That's for sure.
yeah. Earlier, you had mentioned talking about bringing pieces in and out for other code developers. You're the only one working on the actual programming side right now?
Yeah, that's right.
What do you have a preference of a language that you like? Are you really good at C++, or do you like Python gaming? Tell me a little about your
Uh,
background in programming.
yeah. So, well, Unity is in C sharp, and
Okay.
that's pretty much the extent of my like extensive knowledge when it comes to coding. I've really kept it to Unity development for the majority of things. Although really now I feel pretty competent in sort of having conversations with ChatGPT, that I do not feel limited nearly as much
Right.
anymore. But I was learning a little bit of like JavaScript before that. And then I've done some like visual node based. If anyone's familiar with Max MSP, that was like a really fun one to learn. but beyond C sharp, I'm pretty beginner at most languages.
Mentioning C sharp, I have to go on a side rant here for a second
I'd
because
love it. Yeah.
that symbol, I'm going to start off by describing its symbol. Four words come to mind just right out of the gate for this symbol. You got sharp. It also stands for number. It also stands for hashtag. It also stands for pound. Now, kids these days only know it as hashtag, maybe number. But if you call like a teleprompt and it's, press the pound sign when you're done recording the voicemail or something, and that's the same symbol. I don't know of many symbols out there that are so diversified in the meaning. And and so I'm like, oh yeah, just use the number sign. They're like, the what sign? I'm like, the pound sign. The hashtag. Oh, okay. And so then you got Microsoft C sharp, and it's just like, isn't that a musical notation? I'm pretty sure. But that's been around long enough that we can give them leeway. Like, if anything, they should have gotten the solidification of what that meant.
Right. I'm trying to think of anything that has multiple meanings on like the keyboard or out of the special characters.
I'm curious about foreign languages because English isn't something that you learn. It's not a logical language. You have to just straight memorize it. And because there's so many things that sound the same, like the word there. There's four different ways to do it, but they all sound the same. And there's even worse examples that mean completely different things, spelled completely different, but sound the same. And maybe other languages are like that, but English is. I'm glad that's my first language because I would hate to have to come in and learn it as a second language. Learning other languages, okay, that makes sense. You got to do that. Okay, I see how that was done logically. It's not across the board, but just more so than English, modern English.
Yeah, there's like a thing of the rules of how you describe something, of like, the quick, dirty, old brown dog, like to describe the dog, all the adjectives that go before it.
Right.
Like if you mix up their order, it sounds weird. And so there is like rules behind the order in which you're supposed to put adjectives in front of.
Right. You don't want to say dog brown quick. Like that doesn't make sense. Just...
Yeah. There's an order thing it's weird. And I think people have been able to tell that a person was foreign because even though their accent was like perfect, the way that they ordered them sort of gave them away.
So you're plugging into to C sharp. Did you get any background in C++? I know that's a huge language for developing video games. Do you have any experience in that?
As embarrassing as it is to say, no, I do not. As I hope to one day become more familiar with it by diving into Unreal development.
Okay.
And I know there's it's just it ends up being faster if you know how to code in it.
If you don't make errors like commas and where they're not supposed to be.
So in the future, I would definitely like to dive deeper into it, but I get by with what I know.
Now, I don't know if Unity has something similar, but Unreal, and I think Unreal Engine 3 or 4, they came out with blueprints. And that's basically
a new one like that. It's visual scripting.
Okay, cool. I think that's a better term for it than blueprints. Blueprint seems more of a homemade recipe. But it's really cool. It's a visual representation of what the code is doing. And logically, you're still following the same concepts, but you're not necessarily typing out the code itself. And Unreal allows you to press a button and it flips between C++ and the blueprint if you want. So if you want to look under the hood, it's there. But for me, it was always just kind of dragging these virtual cables around, and it gets real deep. I had kind of thought you just say, okay, I want to move around, so I'll plug this cable in. Nope, it's every minuscule detail has to be logically programmed. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's 2024. I kind of thought it'd be a little bit more ahead of that curve, but that's kind of what separates the amateurs from the pros. And I'm very much an amateur, so it's just like just an observation there.
It really gives you a great appreciation for the developers who kind of go that extra mile and put like little fun things in there. Because just being able to have a character like, go up to something in a room and like, push it over or have it squeak or, something totally innocuous, but like kind of makes you smile and laugh.
Yeah.
It did take them, like they explicitly went in and spent, probably a chunk of time implementing that, expecting someone to, appreciate it in the future, even though it doesn't add anything to the game. I really like it when developers do that.
Not to sound like a job interview here or anything, but tell me about some of the more challenging aspects of putting this together. Is it the programming side? Is it the business side? What was some of the most difficult things to date, and what do you think is going to be challenging in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been challenging to get it to replicate what Blender is doing. Blender is like a fairly sophisticated program, and then like once you start getting into actual object creation, trying to replicate that in Unity is just it's really it's a deep dive. So I'd say like that portion of it has been, but also trying to make it the type of thing that it's not just me that understands, but it's the type of thing that people can understand if they are coming in, and also trying to make it so that if they don't understand, then I have documentation. So I'd say like a consistency, like staying consistent to every single day. I'm trying to do a little bit of something that is completing the whole. So, I might get really tired and not feel like coding or doing anything in Unity. And at that point, I'll still consider it a win if I go into like the documentation that is either the game design doc and write a little bit there to clear, like, help define what these different things are doing. Or, it might be in the business side where I have to do a little bit more research on what is it that's going to make it a more successful Kickstarter, or when is the best time to release a game. What are the different types of things that we need to do if we're hiring people, like the budgeting. I have to still fully figure out the whole budgeting and where everything is happening. So I'd say in the end, the hardest thing has been to do a little bit of it every single day and to stay consistent with it and to keep that energy that says it was a good idea in the beginning, and now that I'm like 6 months in, I'm like, it's still a good idea. I should still keep on putting a bunch of time into it. It's going to pay off, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
If you made it more than 3 days consecutively saying it's a good idea, it's a good idea. It's always the ones that you think of late at night, and the next day you're like, "Oh God, that sucked."
Those are terrible. Yeah.
And with hiring people, it's always great on paper when you hire them. Their skill sets are fantastic. Their resume may have a certain depth. Their pay scale it aligns with what you're looking for. But then reality sets in. They arrive on the first day, and there's this large uptick. They could be a genius in programming, but they have no idea about your environment, about your files, about what you're doing for lunch. All that stuff matters, and it does take time to onboard people. And that's not even just the HR side of things. Once you grow into that world, it's, hey, this is how we do things. This is when and where you save things. Don't just merge your branch into the master branch because you felt like it was a good idea. I've worked in application companies that they worked in a single save file. They didn't have a master. They were just shooting from the hip. And I'm like, you guys have like 40 customers and you're just wrecking things every day. Like I wake up at 5 a.m. and people are pissed. because you decided to push out a small patch that broke half the product.
Oh my.
And so take Star Citizen, for example. I don't know if you know much about that game, but it's an interesting study because of the amount of funding they have, how long of a development time they've gone through. 2012, they've been working on it for 12 years now. And it's it's the most funded game in history. And it's still not done, but it's basically going to be Ready Player One whenever it does come out. And it was so interesting to learn about their hiring process. They would bring someone on and the way that they had to get integrated. It could take up to 6 months to get a new hire up to speed and fully one with the rest of the team. And even then, plus or minus 1 or 2 months. It's a whole challenge on its own. And as you guys expand, I definitely wish you the best of luck. And, it's going to be a unique situation. I could see.
And I mean, like hearing stories like the Star Citizen, that's super inspirational and also like a great. I'm gonna look that up later on and see what they're doing right.
They gotta be doing something right because every year they raise about $100 million, and they just keep going. So it's a fascinating idea, and their success or failure will set the tone for other games to come for the next few decades. Because that's how big they are, and they started very much as an indie company. You could only say it's a AAA now just because of the sheer funding level, and they have like 16 studios across the world, just to keep it running 24/7. But that scale is enormous. So, thinking about the future here, what are it almost seems obvious that once this gets out and people start picking it up, you'll add on some DLCs to make it more extended and kind of a deeper concept, and then maybe jump to other applications. So I love the educational foundation there. Can you dive into a little bit more of what you guys have drawn up for the future? Do you think that this is going to be your primary focus, or do you want to try to make something completely different in the next 10 years?
Well, hopefully this will be kind of like the springboard into, some of the bigger goals that we have, which is, accessible learning. And what I would really ultimately like to build towards would be, an online, digital world where there's, an economy that is built on, simulated products that are created using, some of these real world skills that you would learn that could be applied to the real world, but within the digital space, you're building them and actually building products that you can sell and exchange. And so, in the case of, like robotics or like using microcontrollers. So, say you are a kid interested in building robots, and you don't have the money or the means of like ordering all the chipsets, and so if you could have these digital versions of them, and then you could go through the process of building a very basic version of like, say, a robot that's capable of, going down a tube and like closing a claw and then coming back out. So say they make this, and then within the digital world, they're actually able to go to other players who aren't interested in robotics, but they need something like that to accomplish one of their, tasks in the world. And so they'll buy that robot that the person made, and then they go off and do their quest and actually use that robot. But in the meantime, the first person who actually built the robot, if they really do enjoy it, then at that point they can go outside. So all of this I'm imagining in VR, and then they'll escape that. They'll go into the real world. And at that point, they can like invest in the Arduinos, the microcontrollers, the wires, the circuit boards, all the supplies that go into that, because they already know that they have tried it and they enjoy it, and so they're going to put more time into it. Mm-hmm. And this can be applied in any sort of like anything that requires money to actually learn. And if we can put it into like a digital world where there's actually benefit to learning these things, then we can get a little bit outside of the educational system, and we can be teaching these things that are very helpful to
Yeah.
kids, and just make learning accessible. And so that's the ultimate big goal, is to create like another thing, sort of like what Star Citizen is doing, or like a Ready Player One, but in a space that really is focused on accessible learning.
No, that's great, because the future of humanity, we're such at a juncture right now that it's either going to be super exciting or super depressing. And and one way to continue the positivity is ensuring that our future generations know how to understand what is going on, the programming, the hardware, and not and always being able to be more intuitive. So, like with I have an 8-year old, and I have an Arduino kit, and it kind of
Mhm.
has some basic stuff you can go through, and it has a bunch of different sensors you can play around with, and it's really exciting to get them involved with it, because that's just the inevitable future. Like back in a few hundred years ago, you would raise your kids to know how to grow corn. It's what mattered. It's what was a survival technique. And that same concept is evolving into now our future generations, the ones that come after us, must know programming languages. They must know Arduino and Raspberry Pi, and whatever that eventually evolves into, they have to become intuitive with it. And whether that's gaming or helping industries out, like energy companies or banking or whatever, it's just more and more crucial that it's like a secondhand ability. So I think what you're doing fits into the future potential of humanity, and it may be bigger than what you can even conceive today if you
Mhm.
keep going down this road. So that, really hats off to you for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting to build towards it, and it kind of always there's always something to strive towards, which
Mm-hmm.
it's always nice to feel like you got purpose, and so
Yeah.
this is a continuous sort of thing to kind of continue to grow towards, and so
Yeah, people
yeah, I
think
appreciate
purpose is something predefined and just kind of lands on their lap. No, no, no. You have to go out and crave for it. You got to go and fight for a purpose, such as the reality of entropy. But
it.
just out of curiosity, what are some of your favorite games that you like to play? Do you have time to play games on the side? Does that inspire anything that you're doing these days? Or just tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, actually, so not as much of a game, but still aligns with sort of what I strive for, is it's called Piano Vision, and
Okay.
it's the Quest 3.
Huh.
So it's a mixed reality app, and it essentially turns the piano into a rock band or a guitar hero.
Oh,
And I
getting me
spend
excited.
hours now. I spend hours playing piano every single day. It's the type of thing where, like, if you want to score, then you have to like hook it up to a MIDI keyboard. But like, I always just play on a regular
Yeah.
piano, because just hearing the song from
Mm.
myself is enough of a score for me, that I don't need like actual numbers popping up. So if you look at my score in it, I've played like hundreds of hours, but my score is 0. And so I
Yeah.
like I absolutely love this, and that this is like another level of like simulated learning that I just really like. And I've kind of learned piano in the past, to kind of read it, but like not enough that I actually learned how. And so I stopped piano for a very long time, and then when this came out, I just picked it up. I started playing songs. I was hearing the songs that I always wanted to play,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny because like when the headset dies, then like I don't know how to play anymore.
Yeah.
Like the playing stops.
Yeah.
But I don't care because like, and there are people who are ask me like, don't you wish you like knew how to read the piano sheet music? And there
Eh,
is a level of me that wants to, but like I'm more interested in actually playing.
yeah.
And I had the opportunity to like learn before, and it made me stop playing
Yeah.
piano. And this has made me want to play piano, so I'm gonna keep going with that one.
That's great. I'm still waiting for the day that somebody invents a piano that represents what we can generate in AR. So
Hmm.
I kind of bridge this together. Something very similar. I go on YouTube and I'll say how to play this song. For example, the Happy Birthday song that the person who owns it that sues every restaurant for singing it.
Yeah, yeah.
How do I play that in the piano? And it does that scale where it shows the notes going to the keystroke, and
Hmm.
I'll learn that way. And I'm trying to memorize it because for like a romantic idea I have is to learn a couple songs for my wife's birthday and to maybe play the piano for two songs and sing the songs to her.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and I'm using these apps to help make that happen. But I love you said the Quest 3. Is that the latest Quest that came out? Is that the new one?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep. Quest
That
3.
yeah, I was really excited to see that. I just think it was like 300 or 400 bucks. I was like, I just need to pull the trigger. Uh, and
That and I'll play uh the Walkabout Mini Golf. I played that like actually a fair amount. I really enjoy their whole concept
awesome.
with that. Hmm.
I would
I
love to see.
recently,
No, I
yeah.
haven't.
No, no,
I would just love to see more like AR incorporated, and it will come in time, but more
no.
AR into the world. So, for example, take your idea, and somebody opens Blender and they put it on an AR headset, and the interaction is in the AR headset, like you're playing the piano, right?
Hmm.
But all you do is load Blender, and the game is on top of that. And so I think that's, I mean, it may take 10, 20, 30 years before we, as a society, evolve in that direction, but AR is going to take more and more place of our lives. I mean, imagine being in the kitchen, cooking a Gordon
Hmm.
Ramsay meal, and you have no freaking idea what you're doing. And all you do is put on a VR headset, a wireless one, and you're in the kitchen, and it's like, okay, pick up a knife, and when it registers you have a knife, it's like, okay, cut these carrots this wide. Okay, cut this
Yeah.
celery in this shape. Cut this cilantro like this. And it's constantly measuring and determining if you're successful and like green light, red light, bonus points, achievement, whatever. And then you make this grand meal that's a 3-star Michelin. And I'm telling you, the future is going this way in a positive outcome. And I think you may, if you say in 10 years from now, you continue to receive funding for this kind of concept, you may transform into this world too.
Oh yeah, I totally believe it. And like, if it came down to you making this meal for your wife and you used AR for it, I don't think she's gonna care at all that you were using an augmented version
Yeah.
to actually cook it. You just like, you
It's what it
made
tastes
a
like at the end.
fantastic meal. Yeah,
She may
exactly.
walk in and be like, "What the hell are you
What
doing?"
are
Like
you
what?
doing? Yeah.
It's like, look, I
Have you
cook. You're
seen
gonna have to clean it, but here's the meal.
have you seen there was like a video of someone vacuuming, and I think it was with the Vision Pro, and they put coins on the ground so you could like, like collect coins while you were vacuuming. I was like, that's such a good idea.
Somebody just needs to simply make a competitive multiplayer house cleaning game, and it's just
Competitive house
yeah,
cleaning.
it's like whoever can get the highest score wins, and then it's just
Yeah.
from there then on out, every AR gamist is the cleanest house.
Yeah. Every
Like
girl will want
yeah,
to date a gamer.
yeah, it's like I speed ran cleaning my house. Check out my score. The future in that sense is great,
Yeah.
and that takes us to our kind of the wrap up point here. And what is, for any indie game developer, someone wanting to get into this world, what's some advice that you would give them if you were able to speak to them directly?
Um, what would be the most helpful? Uh, well, one is the consistency. Just try to do a little bit every day so that it doesn't matter how small, it just keeps it you like a little chipping away a little consistently is going to do
Mm-hmm.
wonders for you. Um, if you if you build for future you, then you're going to thank yourself
Mm.
constantly. And then finally, uh, use ChatGPT for more than you would think, because I can't tell you how often I'm just asked, like, even for communication of like, hey, I got this type of feedback. My natural reaction, because like I can sometimes get reactive.
Okay.
uh I'll like, you know, take what I'm about to say to them like in an email or a text, and I'll send that to chat and be like, is this an appropriate way to respond to this? And it'll come back with like really valid advice. In a lot of ways, I've like, you know, saved a good amount of you know, like I don't face, I guess, by
Yeah.
not like, you know, reacting too
Being so
heavily. Or
emotional. Yeah.
yeah, and like, you know, when it comes to like budgeting or like even just getting a good sense, like when I was looking for times to release, I asked it like, what are things I should consider when I'm releasing a game or when I'm starting a Kickstarter, and then, you know, just break it down, kind of have conversations with chat, because it can really give you this worldview. It's a worldview at your fingertips, and it will constantly come in handy. So it's worth the $20 a month. The Chat GPT 4 is worth the $20. And then also, if you use it for code, then do not expect it to give you all of the code at once. You kind of need to have a conversation with it, and then also be nice to it. It actually does help to be nice to
Yeah.
ChatGPT,
They're gonna start getting
which
cranky.
is yeah, which is so funny. And then you can also like create your own chat GPTs. I have one where it's specifically, it knows that I'm building Blender Start here, and it knows that I need to do conversions. And then also in the prompts, I say like at the end of every like response that you have, just like, you know, 10% of the time, give me a haiku. The other side, like, give me a poem, or like say something that you like about the world or something like that. And you find yourself kind of at the end of these responses glimpsing at that little prompt, and it like, you know, when I'm writing down things, I find myself a bit more like poetic in what I'm writing, because I'm just getting fed this sort of constant stream of like, you know, what is essentially good vibes from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And so you can like insert these little extra things in there that continue to kind of like feed into your subconscious, as like, you could have like, you know, share me a fun fact, or like, you know, show me something cool that I can do in code or something like that. So really take advantage of it. I'd almost want to say ChatGPT is like, you know, one of the biggest things I can give as advice.
It's not just Chat GPT. There's Bard, Microsoft
Or yeah,
Copilot that's coming out.
Copilot is solid.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, eventually they're going to start interacting with each other. I think there's already people that are using generative AI to work with on top of each other. So they'll ask, like, let it ask its own questions, its own conversations.
Hmm.
You know, we're at the nascent phase of what this is all going to become in the next 20, 30 years. I mean, it's going to be like, yeah, it's obvious how it turned out, but it's going to be so much different, so very different than how we see it today. Chat
Hmm.
GPT 4 being the most basic, fundamental level. And I think it does need to be incorporated at every level. People should reference it. When I get mad at work and somebody's a completely incompetent failure of a professional and I just want to yell at them, it's like, Chat GPT, how should I respond to this situation? And it
Yeah.
gives me a list of things. And I'm like, I bring them into the office and I said, you are a valued individual for these reasons, but not for these reasons. And it's just like it helps center my alignment of how I talk about things
uh,
and helps bring me out of my narrow minded focus and the struggles of a human being. You know, it's just I want to yell and go full Steve Jobs on people, but I can't. And so that helps me a lot. And who knows what Apple would have been if they had Chat GPT or
yeah.
Microsoft at that matter. But that's really kind of a crazy thought.
And it's also crazy to think that like kids are gonna grow up with always having someone willing to talk to them and answer all their questions. Like I can imagine that like you know that if you're being asked questions all the time as a parent, eventually you kind of like check out a little bit. But like these things will always be responding and
Hmm.
always give you like pretty valid information. And so I can imagine that the next
Yeah.
generation is going to be like plugged in and pretty aware of like a lot of things.
When ChatGPT first came out, I would prompt it for children's stories with certain details, like use my kid's name under this kind of condition, sort of a
Uh-huh.
Cinderella story, and then I would read that to her at night. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it gave me a way to customize a story more than you might be able to improvise as a
Hmm.
individual, and it's really fantastic. And then I turned around and started saying, hey, if you have questions for ChatGPT, this is how you do it. And a 5-year-old can only comprehend it so much, but it's an introduction to it, and
Hmm.
I'm not afraid of it, and so I'm trying to get them as much of a head start as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for your game. I think you're aligned with that kind of future with the way that you're developing this, and I'm super excited about it. And the game name is Blender Start Here. I think it's a fantastic and catchy name. When I first saw that, I was like, wow, I got to look into this more. Educational simulator, rated E10 plus. I guess that rating is just because of at a certain minimal age you have to understand Blender, and really before 10 that can be challenging. Are you only going to put it on Steam?
Initially, yes, and then hopefully that in the future we'll release it on web. But the release will be on Steam first.
Okay. And your studio name is, if I'm saying it right, XRIO. Is that zero? Is that supposed to be like a shorthand
Yeah,
for zero?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Dave, I'm super excited about this game, and I want to thank you so much for coming on to Yeti Talks to talk about your game. And I hope to
Thank
have you
you.
on in the near future to learn about how it's developing and what you're doing next.
I
So
would
I
love
can't
that.
thank you enough.
I can't. Yeah, thank you. This was great. I enjoyed this a lot.